glad you could join me today because it's a very special show. Welcome, first of all. I'm your emotional support cougar, Carla Collins. This is Carla Collins Rocks the Elmo. And I gotta tell you, I'm shaking a little bit like a chihuahua on meth after a couple of 5-hour energy drinks because I have pretty much interviewed all the rock legends of Canada and all the rock gods and alt-punk gods, I thought. I don't know how this fella and I didn't cross paths. I know that when I was a morning person, I played all of his songs on what was it was called The Mix. I think it's now Virgin. And when I was interviewing people at CTV or Sonic Temple, I always missed 5440. So it is my great pleasure. I'm so glad that you're hanging with us today. It's Neil Osborne. 5440, into house kind of. You know, Neil, I guess the one thing you and I have in common is during that brief window in 2020 where things were open, we both played the Elmo.
Yeah, that was fun. A lot of fun, actually. You're not a morning person anymore? Neither am I. Never was.
Neil, I wasn't a morning person when I was doing morning radio. I used to take a nap between 7 and 9, and I was really refreshed. But I got a whole pile of questions for you. First of all, you're talking to us from Vancouver right now, and I understand you're in between homes.
Yeah. So we lived in Victoria for 15 years and decided to do a change. This is before COVID, so COVID was a change already, I guess.
Yep.
And we've been house sitting and floating around BC for the summer and the fall. And we just bought a house actually on a little island, one of the Gulf Islands called Gabriel Island, and we're very excited about going there. But it's not going to be till February.
Well, congratulations. I love Victoria. I've played there. It's one of my favorite spots in Canada. And I know you were there. And I have to say that you're this interesting combination. And we'll get to all of your 57 projects because you have a lot going on during the pandemic, which I enjoy. But so you're this quintessential rock star. And your band is, I believe, coming up on its 40th anniversary. Do I have that stat right?
You absolutely do. We call it the 5440th.
I love it.
So our official first gig was New Year's Eve 1980 at Smile and Buddha Cabaret in the downtown east side of Vancouver. So we know exactly when our 40th is, which is going to be New Year's Eve 2020.
Wow, well,
exciting.
You're kind of an anomaly, Neil, in that from what I glean, your band hasn't had a lot of drama or a lot of people quitting and, no drummers have blown up or anything. And it seems like that's pretty unusual, right? Like to have 40 years with the same workmates is, let alone in the rock or music field, is, it's kind of a unicorn, no?
I suppose a little bit. Dave Genn came in 2003 when Phil, the lead guitar player, left. Other than that, it's been the same. When Brad and I started this, we met in grade 11, and being fond of records and music, and our dream was to open a record store, believe it or not.
Really?
And we decided to, but it was way easier to start a band.
And more chicks.
And yeah. And then the recipe for the band was essentially just, it didn't matter if you could play well, it doesn't matter if you could hang out in the van for hours on end. And we were already best friends, so we just made sure that the people with us were people that we wanted to hang around with, and the playing part could come later. So I think that's a big part of the recipe.
I think it is
chemistry.
Too. Yeah, the chemistry is everything, because as you say, you can work on your craft. One of my best friends, still my best friend from high school, Guelph, Ontario, thank you very much. And when you know someone since grade 11, there are not a lot of surprises. Like you know them right from almost, when we're still not fully formed. So there's got to be a trust on stage night after night when you have that kind of background.
Yeah, you're right. And of course, we grow together, right? We've sort of grew into our adulthood, I suppose, if there was such a thing. And then been around the block many times together, and it's just good having people inside out and trust, and the loyalty factor is huge. So it's a good thing.
Very good thing. And you also have probably, well, certainly the longest lasting marriage in Hollywood. But I think also in the game, you've been married to Janine since the 80s as well. Like you've had bandmates and a wife since the 80s, and the only thing I still have from the 80s is this hair.
That's good hair, though.
Thanks. It's quality 80s hair.
Yeah, yeah. Yes, got married in '86. I don't know how many years that is.
Yeah,
It's a
I'm not good
lot.
with the math either, but it's a lot. It's
Yeah,
many
yeah.
years. It's many years. And
And
so,
then yeah, and Brad got married in '87, and he's still married too. So yeah, it's been good.
so what? I mean, people listening, do you have? I mean, I feel like you're the Yoda of music. I mean, you have like to have that kind of longevity with both your career, your bandmates, and your wife. And it sounds like we'll get into this, but it looks like your daughters don't have daddy issues because I've been enjoying the family curse, and you're working with candles. So it feels like you have it all going on, and I feel like you're just far too together for this pandemic. So give us some pearls of wisdom.
I don't know about pearls of wisdom.
They don't have to be
Just
real
seems
pearls.
natural to me.
Yeah. So you just
Yeah,
think
yeah.
everybody overcomplicates it?
It's pretty easy to do. It's pretty easy to do. I mean, and I got good people around me, like my wife and my kids. They're not afraid to call me out, tease me a lot. Somehow I take it.
Well, I always found like in my family, teasing was a form of love. Like if you weren't
Yeah.
getting
Well, it's a form of
teased.
fun for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
for sure.
a good sense of humor is part of it, and I think another.
Critical.
It's everything, right? And do you think
Yeah.
like what about? Seems to me that you didn't buy into the whole lifestyle. Like I know that you're a cyclist and you look great. You seem to be in shape. I feel like you didn't, as brilliant as your songwriting is and your musicianship. I feel like you don't take yourself super seriously.
We know. Yeah, I can get caught doing that, just like anybody can. But no, no. I think that's got to be one of the main rules: is not to take anything too seriously. You know,
So
but work hard.
So you've always had, and the whole band's had a work ethic. That I mean, because like I feel like even on Keep on Walking, listening to that earlier this morning, I feel like there's just every song is fantastic. Hold My Kisses, like how's your
Thank
day
you.
going? Like I feel like every song is its own little masterpiece, and that's not again typical for albums.
Well, I mean, we enjoy. It's interesting. We enjoy the process. We enjoy creating. I mean, that's been sort of the fundamental thing, and we have this work ethic, or I guess standard, or sort of some place that we know. Okay, that's where it should be, or that's as good as we can make it, or that's creativity is interesting because once you start, you have an idea, or maybe you even write a song, and then you go to record it and shape it. You have to be conscious of how it's changing as it goes at the same time with the intention that you originally started with. And those two things kind of meet. And we're getting good at being understanding when the result is there, if that makes any sense, or the end point is there. It's like, yes, that's it. It's kind of half mystery and half what we intended. And if we can leave it there, then we know we've done a good job.
I like that because it's
Does that make
hard.
it?
Like, I completely understand that. I just remember at first I wanted to go into fine arts, like painting and sketching, and I had to abandon that because it drove me nuts because I was never finished. So I didn't get
Yeah.
that sweet spot of half mystery, half completed, ever.
Well, that's a good thing. I think one of my favorite words is, well, not words, but potential. I always like when writing a song or creating music is to hear the potential. When you first start with an idea, and probably the same with painting, you see where all the places it could be. It's almost like these multi universes, and it's
Mm-hmm.
almost a shame to have to finish it because the potential of it, the inspiration behind it, is such an addictive thing. And then, of course, once you get near to the end, what I usually do is, okay, what's next? Where's my next little buzz coming from?
Is that why do you think that's one of the reasons you're such a prolific songwriter?
Um, I guess so. It is pretty addictive. The idea of creativity. It's like knowing a whole new language in a different universe. So why wouldn't you be into that?
Exactly. I mean, not to sound trite, but give me the process. Like you say, when you get an idea, where do you think you get most of your ideas? Are you inspired? Are you doing some lucid dreaming? What is it? Just everyday life or varied?
It's varied. Part of it's process, like let's use just a box of crayons and no balloons today, that kind of thing. And then something just appears, usually like an idea. And Stephen Drake said it best when he said, all ideas come pregnant. And I thought that was a beautiful thing. They come pregnant with more ideas. So one idea leads to the next, which leads to the next. And you sort of follow the trail, of which there are many different pathways, and you start exploring. And usually when I hear a piece of music or create a piece of music, or, quite often it's just sound check jams or whatever it happens to be, I hear something, once again, potential or an idea, and then at a later point or even at that point decide to pursue it and then just explore with it. And it's just fun. It's a trip.
You can tell that you enjoy it. So it's like an octopus in the multiverse. It can really go out in every kind of tangent. So
potentially, yeah. But you only can go one way.
So I mean,
right.
I think from the beginning, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but 5440 is such a distinct, and it's hard to put you in any kind of bracket, right? Because there are notes of folk, and neo punk and alt rock. It's I've heard you described a lot of different ways, but I believe you have this persona in your solo endeavor, which is really unique, and I don't know, to me almost feels, it's almost like performance art. I think it's Nizwiz, if I'm pronouncing that correctly.
And yes, you are.
And this to me is like, I'm out. I don't even know how to put a genre on this. I feel like you may be pioneering an entirely new cool thing I don't know about. Neil, because how do you describe it to people? If because you're doing it vinyl and it's art, and you tell me.
Well, it is. Yeah, it's kind of a social commentary / art rock record. It's funny because a lot of the songs on there seem to resonate with today's world of COVID and all that sort of stuff. Mm-hmm. Even though all the songs in the album was actually written and mixed before January, so it's almost like a prediction that almost came true. Mm-hmm. But I just decided to explore these different ideas as I like to call Citizen Niz. Now, Niz is the name that my daughter calls me. She calls me Niz. I call her Kiz. And then we, have these last names called Wiz, which is just a fun thing. So I thought, well, what is this person, who's, been around since the 60s in Canada, in this world? What's going on? How do they reflect, what's happening in the world? Things like anxiety. Anxiety is something that an individual could feel, but it's also something that society feels, mm-hmm. or the whole world feels. And it's not specific to any issue. It's just a general, like, how do you be human is kind of the where it's at. And then I adopt different characters and personas and attitudes throughout the album. The interesting thing about the album is that each song, I wrote all the titles in a stream of consciousness thing. I said, I want to do a creative project. It's just me, where I'm going to do everything, play every part, compose everything. And it's going to be vinyl, and it's going to be a double vinyl. And then I just put this huge chart on my wall in my studio on a canvas. Must have been about 5 feet by 10 feet or something. And I side A, B, C, and D, and I named all the titles. Uh-huh. And then I began to write them in order and record them in order. And the lyrics, I never wrote any lyrics down. I just sang in character 3 or 4 times to tell the story, what I thought the title was. And then went, yeah, that's it. That's what I want to say. So it was very liberating to do it that way.
It's interesting that you leave the band environment wanting to tackle the micro and the macro as a solo artist, but then you inhabit all these different characters. Mm-hmm. So now you're your own band. Different sides of you, different how many characters in total, Neil?
Well, I mean, I guess you could possibly say 17, or is it 17 songs? I think there's 17 songs. I can't remember. So each one goes to that place of what's happening in that particular setting of the song, and whether it's somebody observing something or experiencing something, or just, one of those two, I guess.
And it's linear. You would like people to listen to this double vinyl in sequence.
Yeah, there's a flow to it. I mean, that it was definitely created that way. Like I said, I didn't even think about the second song till the first one was completed, and then from there went into the second and third and onwards. So, I think the last song is just a little it's called Epilogue, and it basically says, I told you my fears, I told you my concerns. Will I be right? Maybe. Or will I be wrong? I certainly hope so, because it's a dire prediction of where things are at.
It's dark.
But at the same time, but there's a certain musicality and beauty to it, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And, the process, not that honestly, I didn't have this intention of this is what it's going to be about and then wrote it. I just sort of let things express themselves, in a sense. It stood out of the way of the muse and let the muse do the talking. So it's a little bit, it would be betrayal to the muse for me to now say, this is what it is, this is what it means after the fact. That's for other people to do, I suppose.
For their interpretation?
But having said that, I think that the philosophy of what do you see, what do you feel, what do you experience, like a good Buddhist would do, is the first step of dealing with things. So even though it's potentially dark, it's also, I believe, very honest, and in terms of the vision or the experiences that maybe I'm letting through. And I think that they resonate beyond me. It's not like I'm trapped in my own little psycho bubble, although that could be the case.
Well, a little bit of column A and B, you hope. I mean, it's interesting that you had a little Khalil Gibran, the prophet, with having done this before this all hit. So maybe that was the muse giving you a little prediction of the future. And then I'm finding it interesting because you're not the first artist I've talked to who has said that something that they had already recorded or wrote or performed, depending on the venue, has now completely, perfectly married or reflected the times we find ourselves in.
Yeah, I think, and that's not uncommon throughout history.
Yeah.
I mean, whether it's an idea or philosophy, you find that they emerge in different parts of the world. Even the invention of the photograph, I think, happened in two different places in the world simultaneously, and there's no way they could have known about it.
Because we're all connected.
So these things are there.
Do you think we're all connected
Absolutely.
to that same consciousness, right? You want to tap into that super conscious,
of course
that
we are.
massive. Yeah, I believe so too.
Yeah.
That's what meditation's all about.
Sure.
And it's also, obviously, and I'm sure other people have brought this to your attention, it's we all have that duality, a shadow side or the yin yang or whatever, depending upon your philosophy. You mentioned Buddhism, however you want to coin it, whatever name you want to give it to it. But because I find 5440, I think for the most part, is an optimistic band. The songs are, are fair, are on the positive side, whereas Niz is taking us to a different place. Maybe a different part of you.
Certainly. And it could have easily become a 5440 record. It would have sounded a little different, and it would have been more band played, I suppose. But for that reason, I really wanted to, didn't want to confuse 5440 audience or 5440 itself by saying, okay, now we're going to go to this really weird, dark, conceptual place. When that's not, with 5440, you have to encompass the whole canon of the music. I don't even know how many albums, 17 albums or whatever it is. And that has its own trajectory and its own path and its own form of evolution and growth within the band. This is something that is quite different in the approach and where it's coming from,
Now,
I guess.
is this a one-off with Niz, or is this something that could go into many other double vinyls or whatever shape? Are we looking at 17 again, Neil?
No, no. I think this. I don't know. Once again, it's not for me to say. It's for the muse to decide that. But I have a feeling that it certainly wouldn't bother me if that's it. If that's the only solo thing that I ever do. I'm quite. I sort of tell my muse right now while we're doing this interview. I'm actually talking to the muse, saying it's okay, and I'm quite satisfied if that's it. That's a good one. I can rest with that. As the only solo thing that I've ever done is that, and now I'm, moving on.
Well, that's a nice place of satisfaction. Because you mentioned it, so what or who is the muse, Neil, to you?
That's a good question. I guess it doesn't just have to be music, and in my case, it's an easy avenue. So I guess that's why I pick it. It could be, like you say, painting. It could just be a way of looking at a tree. It's a call to be inspired. It's a call to have an idea. It's a call to look at something differently or for the first time again. If that makes any sense.
It does.
And then you marry that with shaping it, with creating, with it's almost like a dance. The muse shows the inspiration shows up. It's like an energy or in a dance, and then you say, okay, you go and touch it. As soon as you touch it, it glows or changes shape, and it does that. So you do that, and then you do this little dance, and then boom, something gets created. It's ultimately cool. I think.
I love all dance metaphors because I started as a dancer, which doesn't mean stripper for the listeners. I have to keep correcting that every time. My student loans are paid off. Yeah, nothing, no shame, no shame. So at different times, are you leading? At different times, the muse is leading, or are you a chorus girls like the Rockettes, where your kicks all have to be the same height? Is it completely equal?
Yeah, I never know. I mean, at the same time, not. It's the thing is with myself, 5440, people look at us as a lot of different things. We're also we're a good time rock and roll band, so we're conscious of making it, putting our craft hats on.
Right.
So there's a part of us that's like, okay, we're going to make this easy. We're going to make this fun. If we have to have 4 chords, it better be a good 4th chord, right? You know what I mean? So
you know your audience.
Yeah, and so it's that comes into play as well, and then talking to people, and then that's a whole different thing altogether. Once you're playing live and performing, it's a whole other thing. But the muse also, believe it or not, can show up there, and often does.
And I imagine this is because you've toured for so long. Is this a welcome repose, or are you? Itching to get back out there? Do you feel like you've got like a phantom limb not being able to jump up on stage during this weirdo time?
Yeah, I mean, certainly miss it. There's no question about it. There's very little I can do to change that, it seems, at this point. So.
But it seems like you've been busy during this time, because I know you've been doing some directing of music videos with your daughter, and I have to say, I'm a really big fan of The Family Curse. Your daughter Campbell's voice is ridiculous.
Yeah, she's good.
She's fantastic. So there's like a whole, plethora of questions here, an ambrosia of emotions that must come with your daughter wants to go into the same business you've been doing since grade 11. Basically, is this something you encouraged? Did you see the talent? Is it just in the genes? That's her blueprint, so boom.
Well, with Candle, we've sort of been buddies since there's this old VHS video of us doing dishes together where she's standing on a chair. I think she's 3 or 4, and we're putting suds on each other's face like Santa Claus beards and just telling jokes, and she's got such a crack wit even at 3 or 4 years old, and we've always had this rapport. Like, she calls me Niz.
She calls you Niz, right?
Yeah, she's the one who gave me that name. So we've always had this fun rapport together. I never, both girls initially when they were in high school, sort of, they had a band and they wanted me to show them a couple of chords, but I never really encouraged it. I didn't discourage it. It wasn't like, this is what you are going to do. You're going to take up the family business at all.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, probably that's why it's called a family curse, because she's got it.
Nothing you can do about it. It's undeniable.
No. Yeah, and she became a very natural writer. And that's how Family Curse started. Is there was it was 3 or 4 years ago, my wife had to go be with her mother who had a knee replacement. It was during Christmas, and my other daughter was in Los Angeles as a chef, and Kendall was in Montreal. So we were all, for the first time, our family was not together at all. Nobody was. Mm-hmm. And so I had these tunes kicking around, just ideas, and I just sort of sent them to Kendall. I said, well, what would you sing over this? And then she sent these things back. I was like, oh my gosh, you really did something that I would have never imagined, both melody and words. And so we sort of talked it through, and we're telling jokes about being this sort of outlaw, duo, going through Joshua Tree or this deep south, and
well, it's LA blues and desert attitude. Blues, and there's another LA blues. There's a lot of blues. Cemetery blues, yeah. Which is intriguing.
Yeah. Well, that's what she said. She said, I was learning how to play slide guitar, so I was just like, oh, this is cool. If I just do this over and over, that could turn into a song, and I would sort of turn it into, or shape it into something. And then she just said, just give me the title and I'll do the rest. And I went, okay, Cemetery Blues, LA Blues, all these sort of things. And then sure enough, she did the rest. So
yeah, it's really extraordinary. Yeah. I love those songs. This is very much
Yeah, thanks.
Degrassi, The Next Generation. We've got Osborne, Next Generation.
Yeah.
With Candle. So you before I let you go, you did touch upon this when we first started talking about Citizen Niz, and that you wanted an outlet to reflect. I'm sure that you said the anxiety, the stuff that you were going through, and then in fact was mirrored back by the world. I just think for people listening, I know an obvious muse for you, an outlet is your music, but can you give us some other places where you find your zen? For me, meditation is a big one, working out. I know you're a cyclist. Do you have a place where no matter what's going on, pandemic, shutdowns, aliens, murder hornets, rapey locusts, whatever's going to come at us next, where you can find that peace or your chill?
It's an ongoing flow of things, I think. One thing I've been into doing, I don't know if I'm even allowed to say this, but I've been into microdosing.
It's the next wave.
Psilocybin.
I would buy shares in that company.
I think there's a few of them out there, mm-hmm. and it's just very subtle, and it just makes sure that you, once again, there's that old saying, treat every day as if it's your last or whatever. And I totally disagree with that. I think you should treat every day as if it's your first, and the wonder of it all. And it's a hard thing to do. It's a hard thing to be conscious of, and I don't do it every day. But the microdosing helps.
It's your pal.
It's a little knock on the head that goes, hey, dude, you should check out that tree and the way the sun is shining on it. It's isn't that amazing? And you go, yeah, really. And if you do that, because you can't really do two things at once in your mind, you forget about your worries.
Absolutely. Well, there was just a documentary on Netflix, and I'm generally based in LA, although a good Canadian gal, so I can tell you that my neighbors, the person I refer to as my older gentleman lover, they're no strangers to microdosing and the virtues of it. Certainly for creativity, and as you said, we have so many distractions at all times, right? Mm-hmm. And it's hard to turn off the ego or the monkey chatter or whatever you want to call it. And I say, if this is something that works for you and you know how to, the word is micro. It's not macro.
Yeah. No. It's just to keep you in. I don't know what it is. Actually, I'm still finding out. No idea what to say.
No, that's perfect. Which means you found your zen. It's a perfect example. Stuff coming up for the 40th anniversary for 5440.
Yes, yes. I mean, you mentioned the word prolific. So we do have a new album coming out, and it is fun. It is
Yeah?
100%
Great.
FUN. Yeah,
We need
and
that.
very excited. Yeah, about that. They're all fun stories of the band throughout its history and colloquialisms and funny stories that we carry around with us in elevators, hotel rooms, and the band that have been with us forever. Like, the drummer, Matt's called Table for One. It's based on a story. So we wrote a song about that.
So road
Our
stories
guitar player,
or
Dave.
like
Yeah, there's sort of roads. Yeah. There's
okay.
one called Same Guy, Different Body, for instance. You know what Same Guy, I think you probably know what Same Guy, Different Body is.
I'm a comedian
That
too,
drunk guy.
so I know the road
Yeah.
stories, so I relate.
Yeah, so Same Guy, Different. We have a great song called Same Guy, Different Body, and it's basically, that guy. It could be a woman as well, but generally it's a guy that gets a little too drunk, a little too brave, and they can come up to you and feel like they're your best friend and all that. And it's a situation, and this song is about a particular story in Kingston where, for some reason, I was standing on the stage after the gig. It was like 2 or 3 in the morning, and the crew was gone, and or busy, and the band was gone, and then this guy's beside me and totally drunk, big guy, big muscular guy, and thinks I'm his best friend. But you know how these drunk people, they're really pissed, but at the same time, they can tell that you're annoyed with them.
It's like a weird superpower that comes up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The guy goes, "You think I'm an asshole, don't you?" And I'm like, "Oh, here we go." So then he wants to fight me, right? He wants to fight me, and it's like, oh. So it took me 20 minutes to talk him down, and by the end we're hugging, and I'm going to sing at his wedding, and it's just like, oh. And
wow.
This happens more than it should. Let me just put it that way.
That you almost get into a fight and end up singing at the person's wedding, or just that guy coming up to you?
No, this is the drunk person, and they get this weird alcohol courage, and then it becomes awkward.
Yeah, they've got the confidence of a matador when they're hopped up on the alcohol, and also like. I'm French Canadian, so I'm a touchy-feely person, but there's something about a space invader and an oversharer at once where you're just like, where I become the shyest person in the world and I want to put up shields.
Yeah.
It's just a rough combination, but, well, this has been a pleasure. It's so nice. It was worth the wait. It was very nice to finally meet you, albeit virtually.
Likewise.
Here at the Elmo. We're both kind of at the Elmo.
Yeah.
I mean, you're up on a screen at the Elmo, so it's almost the same.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
Well,
I'm just in a weird little room here.
I didn't want to. I don't judge. That could be that you could be renting that room out to the Muse right now.
Yeah.
You just keep doing what you have to keep pumping out the brilliance. Thank you so much for spending some time with us.
Oh, thank you. No worries.
Neil Osborne. Hey, I'm glad that you could join the doctor and moi today. I'm Carla Collins. This is Carla Collins Rocks the Elmo, and I hope you're staying safe and healthy and reasonably sane. I think that our guest today can help. If nothing else, he has a slamming shirt on, and that usually fills me with confidence. So actually, he's kind of a big deal. I do not know this gentleman, so this will be our first date. But he is a world-renowned keynote speaker, is the author of 2 best-selling books, Brand Like a Rock Star and Start You Up. He is also the Senior Vice President, Brand and Content Manager for Stingray Radio's 100-plus radio stations. He's a baller. Please welcome Steve Jones, right?
That sounded so over the top, self-important. I feel really, really loved and appreciated now. This is good.
Well,
Thank you.
That's what you told me to say, Steve, right? That's like how we rehearsed it.
Yeah, you read it. You read it perfectly.
I know, and yet no notes. It's a smaller budget here. This ain't Stingray Radio, okay, Mr. Senior Vice President. Who's the Junior Vice President?
We're burning through money.
So you were going to be with us in person, but of course, due to the nature of the the corona. You're back in lockdown, and but I appreciate you taking the time to talk to us virtually. So you've been doing these talks all over the world saying, here's how you can brand your business like a rock star. What do you think? Is this going to make it a little more difficult, or is this a great opportunity for people to come out of
It's
COVID?
it's it's both, really. It
Okay.
is, and I kind of fell into this accidentally. I wrote a book in 2010 called Brand Like a Rock Star, and it was just this idea that I've observed over the years in the media business, the rise and fall of so many stars, and so much of the things they were doing either on purpose or by accident. All those things were applicable to just everyday business, whether it was like learning from Kiss or Foo Fighters or Taylor Swift or Justin Bieber. There were all these things these musicians were doing, these rock stars were doing that could help businesses. So I wrote the book kind of just for fun, just because I wanted to, and it led to speaking engagements kind of all over the world, as you said, and it's been a fantastic ride, getting to talk to these industries that have nothing to do with what I was raised in media and in music, getting to speak to you know, insurance conventions and medical conventions and marketing organizations. I think my favorite headliner was 2018 headlining Pest World 2019, the International Convention of Exterminators.
Fantastic. And were they partying like rock stars? I imagine that
They really,
exterminators, they must go hard because they're probably immune to most alcohol and drugs.
yes, exactly. The alcohol won't kill them.
No.
They're like Keith Richards. They're already embalmed.
Exactly. They just like they get more of a superpower going. You know, it sounds a little bit familiar to my world, Steve, because I do stand-up comedy, and you know, we love doing corporates back when we could. And people would say, why do you like doing those so much? Because whenever you go, and I'd always have like the Bakers Association of North America, or one was the Vending Machines Association of North America. Got to
Who
pull out
knew they had a conference?
the big Turk joke. But what I loved is, and I'm sure what you're finding is, I was often there for what would be like their Academy Awards, right? It was all very celebratory, and you can personalize it. So basically, you're making bank off of one big ass metaphor. You're just comparing
Yeah, it's
businesses to
really,
rock bands.
that is it. And I keep reinventing it because it keeps reinventing itself. It's perfect such a perfect link, right? Like we talk about these COVID times and all these challenges we're facing, and then you look back at music history that is filled with fantastic stories of comebacks, like
What about,
Meatloaf going. Hmm?
yeah, no, so tell me Meatloaf, because there's one in
Well,
particular I
Meatloaf
want.
going 16 years between hits, right? Like
Right.
Bad Out of Hell was a number one, and then he had 16 years where he almost went bankrupt. He almost took his own life. He was destitute, and then back to number one again. Rock stars are famous for being just so resilient and having this often completely irrational belief that even though they've fallen from grace, their best years are still in front of them.
Which is because I think people think life's trajectory is like this, or we're never flatlining. It's all over the map. It's like a crazy
Yeah.
child's drawing of a graph. Like, so some of the big comeback stories that I'd love to hear about, or what your thoughts are, and as to how they relate to business, like Aerosmith would be one, I would
Yeah.
think, because they
Aerosmith.
were big and then not so big. And
Yeah, it's a great story too, in particularly in the context of 2020, because you have this band that in the 70s was huge, and then just became consumed by alcoholism and drugs, and fell into a dark place. And nobody in the music business expected them to emerge from that dark place. And then in 1985, at the same time, you have this hip hop group in New York City, Run DMC, working with a producer named Rick Rubin, who's super into rock music. And Run DMC, the guys used to freestyle over that drum loop from Walk This Way, but they didn't even listen to the song. They just repeated that drum loop and they freestyle their rap lyrics over it. And it was Rubin who said, "You guys have got to record the rest of that song as a rap song." And then they came up with the idea of working with Aerosmith. And the irony is that nobody in Run DMC and nobody in Aerosmith really wanted to do it.
or do
But
you
the
think they even
producer, Rick
really
Rubin,
knew of
brought
each
them
other?
together.
Were they
Well,
familiar at
no,
all
not
with each
really.
other's worlds?
No, Run DMC had no idea who Aerosmith was. In fact, Daryl from Run DMC says they didn't even know there were lyrics to that song. They only knew the drum beat. But
Wow.
Ruben put them together, and the result, as Daryl says, is like in that moment in the video where Steve Tyler is smashing through a wall with his mic stand, and then he smashes through the wall at the chorus, and Run DMC are on the other side of the wall singing. He says in that moment that wall broke down for real. Like in the real world, that wall broke down social barriers and music barriers. And all of a sudden, Aerosmith's career was revived and went through its most profitable stage. And Run DMC and hip hop music became something that kids in Sault Ste. Marie or Berlin, Germany or Australia,
Right.
suddenly they were listening to this music that was up until that point restricted to America's inner cities. So it was an absolutely cool cultural moment that also applies purely on the comeback side too.
Well, yeah, and as you said too, with age, right? Introducing, it's like introducing Gen Zs or I guess Gen Zs here in Canada to Boomers or Gen Xers, and the exchange that happens there. Because I know, and then really Run DMC I've always loved, and I love that song, but Aerosmith never went away after that. If you think about it, I mean,
No, that was
Steven Tyler also looks
without
like one of the
that
Real
they don't.
Housewives of Beverly Hills, but still a sex
one of
symbol.
the one of the really old housewives.
So
It's amazing that without that interaction, Aerosmith doesn't go on to record Permanent Vacation. They don't
right.
go on to be the Vegas act of recent years, and Run DMC maybe never breaks out of New York and becomes a worldwide phenomenon and does what they did for hip hop music.
Exactly, and all mainstream. So that's a great example of what I'm just going to dub of some type of rock and roll Red Rover. That's a great example of a great rock and roll marriage, unconventional, interracial,
Mhm.
intergenerational. I love it. I saw something you were speaking of, and I thought, oh, it's so true. One-hit wonders that made an entire empire, like Jimmy Buffett.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that the Jimmy Buffett story is amazing because it really is a guy who recorded one song, 206 words about getting drunk, um, and turned it into a business empire. He's just a master of giving his fans that beach bum experience wherever he goes, whether it's one of the restaurants or casinos or hotels or a Jimmy Buffett show.
It's like a cult,
He
really.
gives it totally is my yeah, it's a cult. It's you go to one of his shows and the experience is very cult-like. A little, there's no Kool-Aid, there's tequila,
Better.
but it's very similar. Yeah.
It's true. And people don't die at the end, by the way. That I've never been, that I know of, that I know of.
Yeah, I have been to a Buffett show and survived, so I say you're accurate. Yeah.
Exactly. Or you're a really cool reincarnation avatar I'm talking to right now. I don't know, it's COVID. Anything's possible, Steve.
The
So
shirt works kind of for a Buffett show too, I guess,
it,
doesn't
it,
it?
it really does. It could take you there. Now, another thing I saw, so let's also talk about, you said something in one of your talks that really resonated with me because we all do this, especially, I'm sure, businesses and certainly performers of any ilk. We want to be loved by everybody, and that's just a losing game. I mean, now I don't
Yeah.
really give a shit, but I know at the beginning I sure did. And you give the example, you cite Kiss as a great example of know your audience, know your niche, work it like that, don't care if everybody else hates you.
Yeah. Well, and Kiss was another band that was about to go away. They were never going to break out of, New York. They were called Wicked Lester. They were going nowhere, and they really thought this through. They thought we need to stand out from the crowd, put on the makeup, spit fire, spit blood, and within 2 years of all of that, they became world famous. And even the guys in Kiss will admit that they were probably mediocre musicians before they became famous, and they're probably still mediocre musicians now. But people were forced to pay attention to Kiss, and I think that as whether it's being a comic or building a legendary bar and concert venue, or any other kind of more traditional business, if you're not willing to get noticed, you'll never be able to explain to people why you're better. People start with like, I'm going to be better than anybody else, or I'm the best business of whatever it is I do. And they forget that everybody thinks that. And until you force people to pay attention like Kiss did, you never get that chance to prove you're better. And you have to accept that, like Kiss, there will be people who hate you.
I was thinking,
And
yeah, that
I'm
Paul Rudd
sure in the
movie.
comedy world,
Yeah. Oh,
right?
well, if you're
Yeah.
milquetoast, if you're going to be so beige that nobody loves you, nobody hates you, I don't think that's a recipe for any kind of business success, right?
No, but it always is like people complain about something and then immediately the business wants to change and satisfy the person who complained. But I've told businesses before, if people complain about you and they're accurate, like if somebody, walks into a Rolex store and says, "I'm never going to buy a Rolex because it's 10 grand and people wear them as, ostentatious signs of their success. I'm never going to be that guy." Great. I mean, Rolex isn't about to release a $100 watch for you.
Exactly.
It's built for that
It,
exact
it is
purpose.
elitist.
Yeah.
It is. That's
It
their.
is.
They
It's
are
just proud of it.
absolutely marketing to the Illuminati. That's
Yes,
their jam.
100%. Yeah,
They are
exactly.
strictly marketing to people who use warm kittens to wipe themselves. So you just have to understand that's a whole other bracket happening.
Well, as a dog lover, I mean, kittens, okay.
Well, I don't know. I'm not I'm not that rich, so I'm just guessing what goes on in rich people's places, Steve.
I can only
So,
imagine.
and also, if we compare customers, I guess, to fans, obviously a lot of Taylor Swift has her squad, Justin Bieber has the Beliebers, and I guess everybody has a
Mhm.
different way of connecting with their fans, right? Is that something that you
Well, and
speak to?
fans is a great word because in business, nobody talks about it that way, and in music, nobody talks about customers. Like, nobody says, "Oh, I'm such a huge Rolling Stones customer. I'm a consumer of Taylor Swift." Like, nobody speaks those words. And in business, we need to look at how we do it in the music business and say, we want to turn customers into fans because fans do crazy, crazy shit. I mean, fans are the ones who will book vacations around concert tours. They'll go anywhere to see their favorite act. Everyone has bought $40 or $50 concert T-shirt that they'll never wear again. We do dumb things because the artist connects with our heart, um, and we therefore make illogical decisions. But in business, far too often we look at customers, and customers are just transactional. They're in it for themselves. They'll drive across town to save on gas. They're just out to get the best deal for themselves. Fans are in it for the relationship. So when a business can turn customers into fans, I think you get into that space where like the Apples and Teslas and Nikes live, where people are super passionate about the relationship they have with the brand, and they become fans and not customers. And those are good for life, and they're good for a lot of profit.
Well, they made it sexier though too. Like when you rattle
Yes.
off those particular brands, I think, well, yeah,
Well, I
because it
think that
becomes part of
people,
the customer's identity, right?
yeah, but take people I think make in business is they believe that you have to be as big as Nike or Apple or Tesla to do that, and you really don't. I mean, here in Toronto, there are some amazing small restaurants that have done that, small local brands that have become that. You don't have to be global to have that relationship. In fact, sometimes it can be even easier if you just look at it as building that relationship with the people in your neighborhood or expanding that to the people in your city or your region. It doesn't have to be a global thing.
Gotcha. So let me go micro and then we'll go macro.
Sure.
For example, so I created something called comedic meditation. And this is a new, let's say, business, for lack of a word, on my part, Steve, and it sort of met the right time and space right now. I
Yeah.
started doing this about a year ago in Los Angeles, where, of course, they're going to be very open to that because every third person's a guru or a realtor or a psychic. So I found that there was some science behind it, and basically I do 20 or 30 minutes of stand-up. People release endorphins. If they want, they can have a drink or two. And then they sit or lie back, and I take them through an authentic, original, it's not a parody, original guided meditation. And
Yeah.
apparently, when you're laughing or when you're meditating, your brain is your brainwave is in a gamma state. So there's actually some science behind it, and people found they relaxed a lot more quickly. They got out of their own head. They maybe heard about my life and felt better about theirs. I don't know. So I'm doing live streams, and it's one of the few things, because no one's jazzed about a Zoom comedy show, but I'll tell you, the
Yeah.
meditation portion, people actually prefer, Steve, to be pantless or on their own at home. Nobody's judging them. They don't have to drive. They can roll over and go to sleep. So how do I brand that like a rock star? I want to make millions. Go.
Well, I love this. To begin with, I love the idea. I love the idea of combining those two things that are so different yet so, intertwined. The point you make about the mental state of the person who's laughing along with comedy, their brain is in a different place, just like someone who's listening to music.
Right.
I find that in my speaking gigs, people are in a different mental state and they're open to the embedded information because they love the music and they love the song and the story behind the song. I think it's similar in the space you're working in. I love the idea of presenting something no one else has presented before, and comedic meditation totally nails that. To me, it feels like the kind of thing that would be very suited to a cult. I think you need to keep going down that path, get some
Okay.
Kool-Aid,
Yeah,
make it
so I
happen.
just
I love
brand
it.
it that way, just to make it its own genre, right?
Yeah, you own the space. It becomes you become the Kleenex because you are more than just tissue. That's maybe not the
It
gentlest
sounds a
example.
bit creepy. We're going to finesse
A little
that
bit
one.
creepy.
I don't mind
But
being
that
the Carla, but, sure.
a little bit creepy feels very on brand. We're good.
Exactly. I'm a little creepy. So, yeah,
A little.
there's some mystery to that. Okay, so let's now take it for everybody who's listening or watching right now, Steve. The macro, because I know I believe you have a talk that speaks to this. A lot of businesses are shut down as we speak, or they're going to open and shut, who knows what the next 2021 looks like. How can businesses take your philosophy and take this time, these unusual circumstances, and use it to their advantage when it comes to their branding?
Well, I would start with someone else's lesson first, and that is
Okay.
in the book Good to Great by Jim Collins. He writes about the Stockdale paradox, about Admiral Stockdale, who was imprisoned as a prisoner of war in Vietnam, and when he was there for years, and when he talked about how he survived that imprisonment, and other people didn't, other people died, and he said one of the secrets was acknowledging the reality and people who said we're going to be out of here by Christmas, and then Christmas would come and they weren't. We'll be out of here by Easter. Easter comes and they're not out. I think we have to start by acknowledging the hard reality. This is going to be a really dark winter. Probably it's going to be. It's going to suck. And yeah, there's a vaccine around the corner, but it could be 8 months. It could be a year. We could be mired in this for a while yet.
Right.
So coming to terms and coming to grips with that reality to begin with, I think is super important. And then applying the rock star lessons to it, I think number one would be lean on the shoulders of others. The Run DMC Aerosmith collaboration, or when Justin Bieber was at the pit of sort of his dark period before reemerging, when he came back, he did duets with Major Lazer. He worked with Ed Sheeran. He didn't come back on his own. I would be leaning on those around you, businesses that can pair together. You see it now with collectives who are working together, whether it's a restaurant and a clothing store, people coming together to combine their resources and be stronger together and lean on each other to get out of this.
Okay.
To me, that's an absolutely critical part of emerging from this pandemic stronger than when you went in.
So collaborations are clutch.
Collaborations are clutch, and perspective is clutch. You need to believe, you need to know this will end. You will get through this, but painting too rosy a picture in the short term, I think, is dangerous. I think as a business owner, you need to look at this long term and go, the next 6 months are going to be hell, but I'm going to do these things, work with these people, and come out of this in a different place.
Now, I hate to use one of the most overused words of this past year, but I'm going to just play a drinking game when you hear it. What are your thoughts on the pivoting for businesses in this time? And I know a lot of people are like, there's like basically a Thai hooker by the end of this because they're shape shifting almost every day. But I'm guessing, and I'm not no authority, but a lot of rock bands have also done the same, right? They have switched gears.
The pivot is super hard to do. I think it's a short-term solution if you're a bar and you pivot and become a wine store.
Right.
I think that's a doable pivot for the short term. Where pivoting gets dangerous is when you pivot into something people don't think you can be. And if
Okay.
you pivot from being a bar into a daycare center, that's not gonna work, you know?
Are you
Um,
sure? It might work for the adults.
yeah, the parents are right into that. But like when
But
Garth
right.
Brooks tried to pivot from country to rock, it did not work. Um, when Van Halen tried to pivot to a third lead singer, it didn't work. You can only pivot so many times before you pivot beyond the expectations of your customers.
Beyond what's
So I think
acceptable, right? The
yeah,
the realm of reality. So pivot, but
yeah.
like to you, just make out with your first cousin. Sorry, I had to do at least one Sault Ste. Marie joke. His name is
Well,
George.
that was either that was first cousin, that's really generous though for,
But yeah, but moving on, and I know, and say hi to your folks are on St. Joe's Island. But you know what I'm saying. So you want to pivot, but you want to pivot not completely out of your
never pivot
reality.
outside of that expectation of your customer. If you're AC/DC and customers come to you, fans come to you to hear 3 chords in the same song over and over for 50 years, keep delivering on that. When you pivot within that framework. Back to the bar example, if you're a bar,
Hmm.
it's very easy to pivot into doing cocktail classes online. You could pivot
Right.
into, being a local wine distributor. But, going beyond the expectations of what your customers have could leave you in a position where you've pivoted into a place where you can't really be successful in that space. And then post pandemic, what are you?
Exactly. Like you don't, like you can't all of a sudden have, an Amish YouTube tutorial because I'm struggling
You're
to
gonna have a hard
find.
time finding an audience for
Stop
that.
judging
Yeah.
me. So
You're putting the cart before the horse with the Amish YouTube channel,
see.
potentially.
Look at you with the Amish reference. Okay, so as because I will wind up here, but before I let you have the grand finale button at the end, there are a billion. I think everyone has a podcast, but I know from in LA, podcasts and web series, even though it looks like everyone's come out with one, especially during the shutdown, that it hasn't even reached anywhere near its supersaturation yet. In fact, there
Mhm.
are now managers in Los Angeles who only rep people who have podcasts. So what do you tell people? And I don't just mean ours here at the Elmo, but anybody at home who is just starting theirs and or taking one of their passions and at least filling their days, right? A reason to get up in the morning. What do you
Yeah.
tell people? How do we stand out in this new world where everybody's coming up with something online?
I think you either have to go one of two ways. You have to be a character that's so compelling you can do any content and come across as unique, or you have to go down a road nobody's gone down before and do a
Okay.
podcast that is in a space no one's speaking to. But you're right, it's getting crowded. It's getting really crowded in the podcast space, but it's nowhere near saturation, and there's a lot of room to grow. You just have to either be a character who's so unique and out
Mm-hmm.
there and interesting, or have a topic that's so different. To me, those are the only two ways to go. And if you can combine both, that's probably podcast gold.
Exactly. It reminds me of the Wayne Gretzky. He always went where the puck wasn't. He went to the
Yeah,
open space. I
yeah,
always loved that
that's a
one.
great line. Yeah.
So, and what's it been like for yourself? What's the current state of radio with everything? I mean, I did want to ask you that while I had you, because obviously that's been going through a lot of evolutions and, different
Yeah.
iterations with online and it's always video killed the radio star and then online killed the radio star and podcast killed the radio star has been like it's like a serial killing, but yet
Yeah.
obviously it's
We've been
still very
written
much
off a
alive.
lot.
You have. So
It's
where
still
does it stand now?
It's still very much alive. Podcasting is, to me, that has helped us because it's reaffirmed the belief in spoken word communication and audio. It
Mm-hmm.
gives radio a whole new area to grow in. I have no issue with people, listening to podcasts because it's a good thing for audio communication. Digital providers like the Spotify and Apple Music and
Mm-hmm.
Amazon, I think there's regulatory things we have to consider about their impact on Canada because they don't pay taxes here. They don't support the Canadian broadcast infrastructure and the music industry that our radio stations and TV stations do support. But beyond that, people have always owned music, and people having a Spotify account is just like 20 years ago when you had a collection of CDs, or 40
LCDs,
years
yeah.
ago when you had a collection of vinyl. It's just your music, and these things can all live together. A healthy music industry, a healthy podcast industry should mean a healthy radio industry. We're navigating the pandemic. It's tough. I mean, you did morning radio. You know how important that morning commute is to radio audiences.
Of
And with that
course.
commute changing, like it's been reduced, not as many people are on the road, that's impacted us. With businesses being closed, you have kind of two businesses out there. You have the ones that are either closed or the ones that are too busy and they can't advertise because they have no capacity for new customers. So a couple of big challenges for us, but we're alive and well. And I think with the resurgence of audio, we'll be well positioned after this pandemic to continue to be indispensable. We just have to continue to make ourselves indispensable and not fall back on being, the cliches of radio and just playing the same songs over and over again. We have to give people something truly compelling.
Well, what radio has is that intimacy and that immediacy, and it's always been with us through. If you look back on history during times of war, or scares, or 9/11, when I was actually on air doing morning radio when that occurred, there is that comfort. There is that comfort to some legacy. I was thinking this when I was interviewing Humble from Humble and Fred, just the fact that those names have been around. So there's a comfort to it to listen,
Absolutely.
or it makes people feel good like they did when they were, teenagers and a little more carefree. So I think radio will always have that over all the other mediums, as you say, especially when you're talking any kind of talk radio. I mean, music is always going to be the closest pathway to anyone's heart.
I'm just hopeful that in this time when people are looking for a sense of community, radio can provide that to them. People who are sitting at home alone, going in the month 10 of working from their bedroom, can maybe find some, the digital providers don't allow you that. The podcast, the Spotify's, they're not in the moment, whereas radio generally is live in your community and hopefully gives people that sense that they belong to something greater than just their messy bedroom.
Exactly. No, I agree. I mean, although I just every now and then say, "Hey Google, do I look hot today?" And she did answer, "You're like a beautiful autumn's day." And I'm like, okay, I think that she might be answering that to everyone.
Working.
I know. Let's keep working it. Well, listen, if Stingray Radio ever needs comedic meditation, if you're looking for like Anthony Jeselnik meets Anthony Robbins.
Wow. With a dog.
With breasts and a dog. I'm just saying, it's...
Wow. The whole package, really.
Yeah. I just branded myself like a rock star. This has been so interesting. I really appreciate it. And such a great new perspective on handling this whole pandemic and businesses going forward.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure, and good luck as you continue to rocks the Elmo.
Well, I'm going to TM that word. See? I'm roxing like a rock star.
You're the whole way, the whole distance. All
Thanks,
right.
Steve Jones, the man, the shirt, the legend. Appreciate you taking time. And Dr. Z and I will return in moments. All right, once again, I want to thank my wonderful guest, Neil Osborne at 5440. And if you get a chance, check out the stuff he does with his daughter. It's called A Family Curse. Her name is Candle. Her voice is extraordinary. I think you'll really enjoy it. And microdosing. Why not? Also, I want to thank Steve Jones. His book is called Brand Like a Rock Star. Highly recommend some amazing marketing strategies that the big rock star bands employ and you can use with your business. All right, we've got a little housekeeping. As they say in the business, something very exciting. As you know, Michael Stewart Webb is the producer of this show and my gay fiance. He is also a lifelong vegan and the Obi-Wan to my Luke Skywalker. This is getting weird, but all this to say, I've been vegan now for about 4 or 5 months, and we have a brand new podcast starting up called The Doucheless Vegan. I know it's the best name ever. We're really excited about it, so you can find this where all fine podcasts are available in all the greater salons. And we really think that there's a need for this because it's got a big honkin' sense of humor, as you can tell. I mean, a douchey eggplant is our mascot, for example. And we just really want to make this user-friendly. It's for vegans, the vegan adjacent, the vegan curious, and everybody else. Maybe you just want to know some tips on how to go vegan once or twice a week. So a lot of love, a lot of laughter. Again, The Doucheless Vegan with Michael Stewart Webb, who is an entrepreneur and lifelong vegan, and moi, the intermittent vegan. But I'm loving it now. So that's exciting that we're launching this week. And I'll leave you with this. Full disclosure, it was a bit of a difficult week. I'm not entirely sure why, but sometimes just everybody makes you a little bit monkey, don't they? So everything from having to deal with an ex and all the cliches that go with that. I had a mean girl incident. I know, at my age. Trust me, we never leave high school. I fully expect that I'll be in the retirement home and some Bertha bitch is gonna jump out and be passive aggressive. There's always gonna be that mean girl. I had some trolls online. There was literally maybe a 5-hour discussion about someone not liking my outfit. That seems like a good use of time. And a couple of QAnon crazies verbally insulted me. And they were grammatically incorrect. And I think that bothered me more. So I had all this going on in my mind, and I came across this great quote. I was listening to something, going to bed. It's from the great late Dr. Wayne Dyer, and is, you can be right or you can be kind. Be kind. So that really spoke to me. I hope it speaks to you. Keep an ear out for The Doucheless Vegan. Thanks for joining us on Carla Collins Rocks the Elmo. If you're watching this on YouTube, 3 different hairstyles for the price of 1. Give us a like, subscribe, leave us a comment. If you're listening, we appreciate it. Have a wonderful week. Love ya.